What's up? Welcome back to my channel, or for the first time if you're new, I'm Sylvan, and today I'm going to be reacting to Lord of Mysteries, episode 5 and 6. That's right, we're getting 2 episodes for me coming back to this. And to pull back the curtain a little bit, I actually recorded the episode 5 reaction months ago, back when I was still actively reacting to the series and such. If you're looking for an explanation for why I stopped reacting to Lord of Mysteries for a while, I recently made a community post about that, so feel free to check that out if you want a little bit more details. But for those of you who don't really care why, I am back now to it. I intend to react to 2 episodes per video until we finish the season. And without further ado, I'll leave it to past me for the reaction to episode 5, and then the analysis will be back to the present, at least as of me recording this, and then we'll get into episode 6. So feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video, leave a comment on your thoughts, consider becoming a channel member if you want to support me just that little bit extra, and let's get into this. I'm very curious to see what this episode has in store, because obviously I talked last time about how I'm curious how Dunn will be affected by witnessing the true creator, the hanged giant, whatever you want to call it. Because I feel like that has to have some kind of effect, even if it's purely like intellectual acknowledgement of this thing. Meanwhile, though, another thing I didn't really mention that I find really interesting, but sort of didn't fully clock in the actual reaction, was that near the end of the episode, when Klein is deciding not to reveal that he's a seer to Melissa and Benson, because he thinks it's going to be too dangerous, he, in his own internal monologue, refers to them as his family, which is very interesting to me, because obviously you could interpret that a few different ways, but the fact that he isn't referring to them as Melissa and Benson or the Morettis or some other way that is disconnected, I'm very interested in. So I'm keeping that in mind as just a character thing. Zootland Street, I think we've heard that name before. Okay, some kind of performance. Ooh. Okay. An opera or something? Interesting way to open the episode. Curse of the Siren. Interesting. Is someone we know in the crowd, or is something going to go wrong with this performance? Oh? There's Klein. Interesting. So he's just here for the performance? Fucking the cat. Oh? Oh? What do we have here? What's going on? Who is this? Triss? Okay, Dunn's here. Okay. Yeah, still not fully good. Infected. Ah, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Getting a lot of focus on them. Hero. Huh. Oh, whoa. That water and boat, geez, okay. The Alfalfa Tragedy. Okay. Is this just security work, not actual Beyonder work? Okay, lost at sea, worrying, worrying. Made it to land. Okay. Interesting pacing so far this episode. So we got ourselves a celebrity. Ah, interesting. Washed up at, like, their estate or something, perhaps? And they noticed something. Ah, Klein and Dunn. Hm. Okay. Ooh. Okay. See your dream. Ooh. So he's diving into the dream? I'd expect that to be more of Dunn's purview. Did not realize a seer could do this. Oh, Jesus. Huh. Dropping their child. Okay. Oh. Oh. Interesting. Ah, okay. The names already escaped my mind. I'm horrible with names, but the celebrity. Interesting. Where are we, though? Ornacus Flagrea. Again. It always comes back to that. A throne. The Black Emperor, perhaps? Their throne? Yeah. Maybe, but that's dangerous to investigate. Ah, yes, Mr. Azek, the most trusting of people. Well, trustable people, rather. Okay, yep. The hero. Interesting. New identity? A joint investigation, okay. Mandated Punishers and Ministry Hive Mind? What? Oh, and we already have the, like, lore blurb? Okay. Demoness Sect. Primordial Demoness. Okay, I'll go back for that. Saw something about the creator in there. Where are we now? Oh, Trish's bedroom? Okay. Spiders concerning. Interesting. Getting Dally on the case? Assassin. Instigator. Okay. Actually, is this Dally? I don't think this is Dali. Ah, okay. Witch. So assassin, instigator, witch. Yeah, I guess it makes sense not to be Dali there, right? Just the hood reminded me of her. Okay. Ah, amulets for them? I like how laid back Neil is, despite, everything. Interesting. Some secret locale. Interesting door. He's so excited. Elevator without a closing door. All right. The underground market. Is that the market we were told about before? Or, like, was mentioned? Okay. An invisible bird? Is that connected to the invisible feathers? I'm not sure. Okay. Church of Storms. Okay, starting to learn about some of the other churches. A man who sees more than he should. Ooh. Ooh. Yeah, that's the vibe I was getting. Okay. Spring of Elves. Okay. Oh? Oh? We run into Triss once more. And now we tail? Okay, he did notice us, though. This isn't the most obscure of, looking for shadow. Okay, An ingredient for the Sequence 7 potion? And the run begins. Okay. Jesus. Okay, save the guy. Good. Things kicking up into high gear very quickly. Jeez, this guy's acrobatic. Presumably, as a Sequence 8, that's not enough. Oh, but got the hat. As a seer, you could probably trace him with that. That's all we need. But what are they after him for? Do they know about this? I love the vibe of this place. What's going on here? Okay. Yeah. Use the hat, yep. Okay, so he's been killing people for a while. They have him nailed. So that's what it was. Okay, makes sense. All right. The Demoness sect. Yeah, okay. All right. Primordial Demoness. Huh. Interesting that we're consistently getting new organizations every episode almost. We got the Secret Order, the Aurora Order. Huh. Oh? This, I think, is the woman with the hood. I do not trust her. Yeah, smart move. Okay. He got out. The three main Beyonder organizations. Tuh. Nice. Good. He views you as a god now. Okay. Interesting that we're getting. Huh. We're getting a time skip of sorts. Huh. Hello, Leonard. What are you up to now? Do we have a lead on what's going on with Triss? That sounds like Triss. Okay. Is the machinery hive mind? Okay, we're in August, worrying. Whoa! August 11th? We're getting awfully close to Doomsday. Okay. All August 11th. Oh. Oh. Huh. Seeing. Okay. Okay. A puppeteer of sorts, it seems. Ooh, a sailor. A mandated punisher. Okay. That's what makes sense. Yeah, okay. tragedy, desperation. Goddamn Leonard. Yeah. Life usurpation. Ah. Okay. Interesting visual we got here. All right. Ah. He views himself as a protagonist. Absolutely a midnight poet. Interesting. What secrets do you hold, Leonard? Okay. I guess being able to find, like, some link to their life force or something? Okay. Where are we headed? I'm really vibing with the music right now. I feel like this show has really solid music. All right. The Westboro. Yeah, the music's really interesting. Not entirely what I'd expect, but I'm vibing with it. Ooh. Okay. All right. Seeing the actual use of the dream nightmare abilities in proper. Yep, okay, it's this woman. You're in a dream now. How is this gonna go? Presumably she's either a witch or something else. Okay, disguising or hiding herself. Invisibility, it would seem. Ooh. Okay. Interesting. What are these things? That's not good. Luckily, it's a dream. Yep. Yep. And now for the Midnight Poet. Whoa! Fucking parrying the bullet? I love how they do fight scenes in this. Okay. Oh. Did she bring herself out of the dream? It seems like it. Yeah. Is it possible to escape the dream through injury? Yeah, that's my guess. Which? Ooh. Okay. God, it's so interesting to watch how this plays, like, out. Okay, she's inside again, or never left, truly. She ignores them. What? Are those, like, the remnants of the life force? Yeah, prayer to the demoness. Yeah. Okay. Fourth rank dead soul type monsters. Interesting. Just sort of processing that. Huh. So an unleashing of ghosts. Oh my god. Corpse collector powers? I assume? What's wrong, Don? Seeing that the altar is no longer complete because the statue was moved? Okay. The use of material here is. Ooh! Yeah, the primordial demoness. Words fail me. What the fuck is happening? I feel like we're seeing a level of power we have not, like, been accustomed to yet. Jesus. God, Dunn cannot catch a break. A flower? Something tells me it's bad to let that get your blood. It goes invisible? Okay. What is going on here? She got Leonard's blood. Okay. Using it to apply the curse, I take it? Yeah. Black magic, okay. It's finally seeing some black magic in action properly. Ah! Jesus. So with some hair and a fingernail, is he able to counteract it? Or, like, redirect it at least? Okay, seems like he was able to survive. Diving into the river? Okay. Oh. What the? Her powers are really interesting. All things considered, you're pretty well off there. Just losing a fingernail and getting a little hurt on the arm. Nice. Interesting. Yep. She's that woman. She didn't stumble into him for no reason. Yeah, that's sort of where my mind was going. Other way around. Oh. Oh. Became a witch. He ascended to sequence 7. Okay. That's very interesting. Yes. Tuh. Okay. Interesting lore. Hi there, Triss. What are you up to now? Wow! Men will do a lot for a beautiful lady. Or at least a lot of men. Not all men. Trissy. Okay. Slight change of name. I mean, Triss alone still, I feel like, could work, but hey, if they want it. They wanted to change their name up, I will not deny it. Even it... Interesting! So we've set up a longer running threat. An antagonist that will appear again later. This was an interesting episode. There's simultaneously a lot that happened and not that much. Well, no, just a lot happened. A lot happened. We jumped forward in time quite a bit. We are now mid-August, pretty much. We've had Triss/Trissy, now Trissy, introduced as a threat. We've introduced a new, like, secret organization type group. And it's much more apocalyptic in nature. Okay. Huh. Seems like he also got some, like, protective amulets for the family. That's always nice. A way to defend them without getting them involved. Yeah, I'm very curious about this episode. It's a much more transitory one compared to the others. Where I feel like most episodes so far have had a very sort of concrete and cohesive, like, whole and focus. This one more is setup and transition. It has a very strong focus on Triss/Trissy, but beyond that, it's just sort of a passage of time. Okay, so back from the past. Obviously, it's been a minute since that reaction, but I've gone over the episode again, taken my notes as usual, and I have some thoughts. First off, I will acknowledge that I don't think I was necessarily at my A game during that reaction. I got confused at a good few points that I feel like, at least on rewatch, some things were fairly obvious. One example being Triss/Trissy, when they do their transformation to disappear into thin air, and then walk out as a woman, they are, like, holding the arm that got shot. That's a pretty obvious sign who it was. But regardless of that, I will not put the entirety of the blame on me being confused on myself. I will acknowledge that this episode, I think, was one of the more confusing ones of the show so far. And I feel like the main reason for that is actually almost entirely encapsulated in the first, like, 5-10 minutes of the episode, and then from there it's fairly straightforward. In my case, I just didn't pick up on the big twist ahead of time. So let's talk about that initial first part of the episode. The main point of confusion, for me at least, and I imagine for plenty of other people, was with the exact timeline of events. Because we start at the theater with a play going on that is retelling a version of the tragedy of the Alfalfa. This scenario where, by the official script, the crew turned on each other and started killing each other, only then for seemingly Triss at the time. I'm going to name-wise go by sort of what they were at the time. And so in this official version of events, Triss shows up or finds the survivors or something along those lines. It's really sort of ambiguous what he actually did to save them, which I will acknowledge might be intentional because of the fact that he didn't save them. He actually is the one responsible. But then after the play, we get a flashback to a week prior when Klein did a divination reading to find out the whereabouts of this one woman's husband who was part of the crew, discovers that he survived, he got washed ashore, that kind of thing. And at various points, it is implied that there are more survivors than just that one guy. But then after that flashback, we do return to the present and stay there with just purely forward time movement. It honestly isn't that complicated when just being described, but for whatever reason, it did sort of initially confuse me a little bit on the exact events that were going on, and part of that is just they were vague. But the important pieces to take away from this is that Triss is a person who has become sort of a local hero, a local celebrity, because he is believed to be the person who had saved the survivors of the Alfalfa crew. But as we learn via investigation into him, diving into the dreams of one of the survivors, we are able to discover, no, he was actually the one responsible. And touching on that dream that Klein goes into, once again, we get a mention of Hornakis and Phlegraea, as we have this vision of some kind of like ruined temple, I believe they call it. And in this vision, there is something that looks like an overgrown throne. And what I immediately think of when I see this ruin and the mention of Hornakis and Phlegraea is that perhaps this is actually the ruins of the Nation of the Evernight, which is in the Hornakis mountain range. So that sort of just ties together for me. But we're working on very little information there, so who knows? It's a continuing mystery. We'll find out eventually. But to really hone in on what to talk about for this episode, I think the main thing to talk about will be Triss/Trissy, as this is effectively an introduction episode to them as a character, but there is of course a few other tidbits I will acknowledge. And I think I'll touch on those first, actually. First off, this episode pushes the timeline forward quite a bit, by about 2 or 3 weeks it seems. We don't have a concrete date for the first half of the episode, but after the little time jump that happens in a little bit of a montage of what Klein's daily life ends up being like, we get some more concrete dates in the sense that over a period of 2 weeks, death rates spiked, and on August 11th is where a vast majority of these deaths occurred, and sometime shortly after that, we don't know exactly how long, probably a day or so after, is when the end of episode assault on Trissy's manor or whatever occurs, which puts us shockingly close to Doomsday. I will remind, September 9th is the date we got for Doomsday in episode 1. Meaning the clock is ticking and we are getting very, very close. Based on this, I would expect either the next set of episodes to slow down the timeline quite a bit so that the end of the season is Doomsday, or for us to have Doomsday coming in merely a couple episodes. And I'm personally more inclined towards the former of those two, but I am aware that the second could also be an option. One of the other main things I want to draw attention to before we get into Triss/Trissy as a character is Klein. Just touch on Klein a little bit. In this episode, he becomes a full employee of the Nighthawks, begins to settle into his proper daily routines. But what I want to touch on specifically is his mentality. I've mentioned in previous episodes that it seems like he's beginning to almost blend his identity a little bit, because realistically, Zhou Mingrui is the actual protagonist. Klein is just the body he's inhabiting. But as the series goes on, that seems to blur. On a few occasions, we've had internal monologue from Klein where he talks about the Moretti siblings and family as if they are his siblings. He'll think to himself in ways that imply him being a part of this world and having connections to people in it, despite him still wanting to get out of this world and back to his own. At the same time, there are moments like in this episode where he reminisces back onto some memories of Klein's that were from long before he ever inhabited Klein's body. And in that moment, he speaks on these memories as if they were someone else's. So there's still a strong distinction between Zhou in the mind and Klein in the body, but they do still seem to be melding and blurring together. One possibility is that their sense of identity and perception and such is more blurred in the present and recent history since he inhabited Klein's body, where any memories of Klein's life before this happening, before the transmigration, he sees more distantly. I could very much see that, but there's a lot of ways you could sort of take it. Then the third small thing that I want to acknowledge is this episode does also expand our understanding of some bits of the lore quite well. There's some expansion here. Notably, we are introduced to two other holy orders, or whatever you want to call them, organizations dedicated to one of the various gods, being the Mandated Punishers, which are dedicated to the Lord of Storms, and the Machinery Hive Mind, who are presumably dedicated to the Lord of Steam and Machinery. We get more of the Mandated Punishers in this episode than the Machinery Hive Mind, but both are mentioned in this episode. And it makes sense that we'd run into these organizations eventually, seeing as they are dedicated to the two other gods primarily worshipped in the Lowen Kingdom. Just makes sense, but it is cool to see nonetheless. I'm curious to learn more about the Machinery Hive Mind once we see more of them, if ever, but because we have a little bit more on the Mandated Punishers, let's touch on them for a moment. They seem to be much more the kind of sort of security detail, secret police type group compared to the Nighthawks, who do a lot of that similar stuff. They deal with any Beyonder issues in the city, that kind of stuff, but it does seem like the Mandated Punishers are a bit more, I don't know, militaristic in their structure. The ones we've seen are much gruffer, a bit more militaristic, that kind of thing is sort of the vibe I get off of them, which, I mean, makes some amount of sense based on the fact that they are related to a god of storms, which is inherently something a bit more aggressive and violent compared to the Evernight goddess. Perhaps a way of looking at it is the Mandated Punishers are sort of the military police almost, where the Nighthawks are the secret police. I don't know if that'll hold up as we see more of them, but that, I think, lines up a little bit in my head based on what we've seen. And while I'm at it, if I were to just take a guess at, in that same general framework, what the Machinery Hive Mind's role might be, I could see them being more the intelligence agency, the eyes in the sky and on the ground, ears everywhere, who gather information and coordinate the other groups so that they can actually properly act accordingly. But that's just sort of a guess, and at this point I think it's about time for us to get to the main thing I want to talk about in this episode, being, as I've mentioned before, Triss/Trissy. So, Trissy, for a good chunk of this episode, Triss. Going forward beyond this episode, if they ever are appearing again, which I assume they will, I'm going to be referring to them as Trissy because that's who they are now, but when relevant for this episode, I will refer to them as Triss. So I've already touched on them a little bit with just the recapping of the initial part of the episode, but to get into it more so, Trissy is part of the Demoness Sect, a group that, based on everything we learn, is essentially a doomsday cult, a group that worships a goddess of apocalypse and disasters and seeks to incite disasters in the world. Notably though, this group, just to go on a tangent about them in general, are mentioned to have been called the Demoness family in the Epoch of the Gods. Based on the use of the word epoch, I would assume that the Epoch of the Gods is a era rather than a text or something like that. We have a very limited knowledge of what the epochs prior to the fifth epoch were like. We have glimpses of the fourth epoch, but the Epoch of the Gods we haven't really had mentioned before as far as I know. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Epoch of the Gods was perhaps like the first epoch or some earlier epoch where perhaps the gods were more involved in the world or believed to be, or something along those lines. Based on some of the mythology we've begun to get on the world, I could see this being sort of the era shortly after the fall of the creator, that kind of thing. And if that is the case, this group has existed for a long time. Easily the oldest organization we have met. But regardless of that, we don't really know too much about them other than their intent, which is, as I said, to spread disaster in the name of their goddess, being the Primordial Demoness, which I'll be curious if we learn more about, because I could very much see them being a separate entity from the other god type stuff like the Hanged Giant and things, but at the same time, if we are to get into some ideas of actual religion and cults, it's entirely possible that the primordial demoness is actually more so just a different interpretation of some dark entity that perhaps other groups also worship, just in different forms. For example, it is possible that the true creator that we were learning about last episode is just a different version of what the primordial demoness is, or vice versa. At the same time, they might just be entirely separate evil entities. But pulling things back to Trissy, sort of went on a tangent there immediately, Trissy is a member of the Demoness sect. And also, they were responsible, as I mentioned, for the fall of the Alfalfa crew, because they were an assassin pathway sequence 8 Beyonder, also known as an instigator, whose entire power, as we learn, is this idea of elevating the internal darkest thoughts inside someone and inciting conflict and disaster because of that. And we see multiple instances of this being used. It's how they cause the Alfalfa crew to fall apart. It's how they presumably later cause a lot of these deaths, because it was a lot of people who already were at sort of a level of desperation that just pushed a little further would act on these darkest thoughts. But very quickly through this episode, they end up elevating to sequence 7, being Witch. And we learn that as part of that elevation to that rank, you have to be a woman. The exact details of how that goes about, how that occurs in that transformation, are fairly limited. We don't get the full description outside of the mention of castration. And speaking of her transformation, I do want to touch on that sequence in the episode more specifically. We haven't really had a chase sequence in the show prior to this, so it's interesting to see how it goes about, but there's some details I'd like to touch on here. First off, the start of the entire chase is because down in the underground market, Klein notices Triss as they are looking for, I believe it's shadow lizards is what they were looking for. And immediately my assumption is that is a required ingredient for the potion to bring them to sequence 7. But unless I missed something, they didn't find any shadow lizards prior to actually being caught and having to run away and get chased. Though that can't be said for certain, there is a moment of cutaway where we don't see him interacting with a merchant that he asked about it. Realistically, he got him there, but on initial viewing, I picked up that, like, we didn't see him get it, so I was sort of confused on, like, how he was able to do the potion without it, but it's entirely possible that was just off-screen for the brief moment that we didn't see what he was up to. Then after the chase, he managed to basically get away from them, killing a few people in the process, get to wherever his hideout was, realistically is where he was, craft the potion, and immediately drink it, process it, and complete their transformation into Trissy just soon enough so that they can escape without being noticed, because nobody would expect for Triss to suddenly become Trissy. No one would really expect the sex change. And though I missed it on the first viewing, it is fairly obvious on future viewings who Trissy is and what exactly happened with retrospective knowledge. Seeing as I mentioned this before, but as she sort of stumbles out of the house with all of the other women, she's clutching her arm where she was shot, which is a fairly obvious connective point between Triss and Trissy. But stepping away from synopsis and more onto character, we simultaneously get a lot and not a lot when it comes to Trissy. One of the main interactions we get that really actually tells us about Trissy as a person is prior to their transformation, their conversation with the other member of the Demoness sect, who we don't get a name for as far as I can tell. But in that conversation, we open with seeing Triss at the time in bed with multiple women who we soon learn are the widowed wives of the crew members of the Alfalfa. And at the time, he talks about how just so satisfying it is to sleep with the women who were married to the men he is responsible for the deaths of, which immediately sets up how fucked up this person is. But on top of that, beyond just being a fucked up person, I think really what we can draw from this is that they are a very prideful person who takes a lot of joy and pleasure in attention. They want to be viewed as the hero, they want to be adored, they want to be loved, they want to sleep with a ton of people, especially if the people he's sleeping with are people who don't even know that they should actually hate him. And interestingly enough, this doesn't fully change once she completes her transformation. We see at the end of the episode that she is reveling essentially in the attention of all of these men now on the train. And that's why I go the angle of saying that they just love attention and being adored and loved, rather than saying specifically that they were just purely a womanizer or anything like that. Because I feel like that is a very fitting term to use for them at the time that they were still Triss, but now after their transformation and seeing that they still enjoy the attention of men, it points to either just being a more general enjoyment of attention, or realistically it also could just be that they're bisexual or something like that. Either way though, I think it probably does come back to that idea of wanting to be adored, wanting to be loved. And whether that comes out of some kind of trauma we'll learn about sometime where they didn't have attention as a kid, or if it is just as simple as they are a prideful asshole who is a horrible person, who's to say? We'll find out if we get to know more about them as a person, which I assume we will. I assume we will at the very least see Trissy again, seeing as we are not only introduced to Triss in this episode and witness their escape, but we are also then at the end of the episode reintroduced to them as Trissy. So I imagine between that and how capable they were, how they were able to barely, but managed to nonetheless, escape from a coordinated effort of 3 different organizations all acting to stop her. Between all these factors, I have a feeling that she's going to be a pretty reoccurring character, presumably reoccurring antagonist. I don't know necessarily if she'll just appear one more time and then get stopped, or if she'll truly be more reoccurring, but the vibe I get is reoccurring to some degree, which I'm excited for. I mean, I'm curious to see what that looks like, because really we haven't had that in this show yet. Really the closest we've had to that so far has been the clown, and really the only reason that we had any reason to suspect them to be a reoccurring character of any kind with some level of importance is because before their major battle and killing, they were in the ED, so we knew they were going to be important. And I suppose at the same time you also could say that Mr. Z might be a major player going forward, a reoccurring antagonist, a reoccurring villain, but we didn't have a full episode introducing us to Mr. Z. They were more a stinger at the end of an episode. So I'm generally just curious to see what the show does with Trissy. Though I was admittedly a bit confused throughout the episode, by the end of it, having rewatched the episode once or twice, I will say that I am a fan of the character. Though it's not quite the same as the conventional means of this, I will always say trans rights when it comes to anybody. I don't care if you're a death cult worshiper or a normal person. You go, girl. Now, of course, I want her to get stopped. I don't want her to end the world or anything. But on that front, she's a person. I'm going to say that. But with that I feel like is sort of the core of the episode. I feel like really that is what the entire focus of the episode is. It's named after Trissy after all. So though we do learn plenty of other things in the process of this episode, that of course is the focus. With that though, I think I will end the analysis of episode 5 here, and now let's move on to episode 6. I'm very excited to get into this episode. It's been too long since I've been watching. I'm also just very curious to see where we go after last episode, because realistically, the last few episodes really have, in large part, been introducing us to a variety of different, hidden organizations and stuff with various motives and intents. And so we have a lot of stuff set up now, and we're approaching about halfway through the season, so I wouldn't be surprised if we relatively soon start sort of progressing a bit of the story beyond just introducing all of these groups. Who knows, though, we might get introduced to a whole other group today. Still just the usual intro, okay. I wonder if we'll see Trissy. Alright, where do we start? Oh? Concerning? Some kind of blood magic or something? Getting a bit messy there. Oh. Okay. Concerning. Actually, teacher, based on that, was was that Isaac Eggers, Klein's teacher? Okay, we're to August 18th. Ah. Okay. Another ancient castle. Okay. Okay, Wraith. All right, we're just getting straight into it. I'm pretty sure a Wraith is one of the most powerful forms of Dead Souls. Tuh. Okay, so they're on a time limit, but they can just disperse the Wraith with it. Okay. Pretty straightforward. I find it interesting how often this show uses small animals to, like, traverse scenery. Oh? Is that the Wraith? God, the Spirit Vision is so interesting to look at. Okay. Above? Oh? Okay, a whole ass sword. Uh, I guess it was a Wraith of a Knight. Yo, is that a fucking Dolan? Ooh, boy. I love the Dolhan vibe. A Requiem charm? Okay. What's Requiem do? Binding it? God. Ooh, dispersing into... Oh my god, okay. Yeah, guns aren't gonna help much there. An abnormal wraith, okay. And it's up to Fry to find the weakness. God. Dunn never catches a break. Oh, it actually targeted it. Okay. It's being intelligent, or at least somewhat, like, aware of its surroundings. Wow. Fucking cutting the bullets. Going for the item, okay. Oh, God. Yeah, that's gotta hurt. Ooh, the ringing. Oh, it doesn't? What's happening? Ooh. Oh, he never lost it. Okay. Using Nightmare to their advantage, I see. Wow, okay. Wild way to open the episode. Yeah, okay, that went better than it seemed it would. Centuries old at the very least, okay. Huh. Concerning, if it's only appeared recently but has the power of a centuries old wraith. A mirror? Oh no, a painting. Late fourth epoch, over 1,000 years ago. That's good to know. Baronet of Lamed supposedly vanished. Okay. They look familiar? Oh. Concerning. No, I don't think so. Okay. All right. Okay. Presumably gonna do some investigation into this place. Or maybe just resting. Okay. Sun pathway. Okay. Okay. Gonna enter the divine realm, as it was called. He really does just have a whole realm to ponder things. The fact that you can use this place to do actual, like, divination and stuff is wild. The source. Okay. The eternal blazing sun. Makes sense. I would expect as much. Okay. Oh boy. Ah. Okay. Ooh, interesting he can, like, move through this almost. Yeah. I have a feeling making contact is a bad idea. Yeah, you might have just contacted a god or some shit. Yeah, that's just the sun. Yeah, that was probably a bad idea. Yeah, okay. Jesus Christ, it breached into just the actual realm. Oh, that's horrific. Jesus Christ. The whispers. Ew, my god. Is he okay? Okay, he regenerates, at least in the realm. That was concerning. I think it was. Ooh. Yeah. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. But you heal. You heal here. Oh? What? Angel of Pure White? Oh. Did he somehow gain knowledge? Sequence 4 Unshadowed? Wow. Yeah. So he. Yeah, if he can find something related to his own path, that's gonna be how he can get to a low sequence. Yeah, probably a good idea. Huh. Wild. Yeah, probably not a good idea. Yeah. That feels like it could be something not inherently the same. Okay. Just a glimpse at what we could be discovering it later down the line. Okay. Interesting. How does this tie together? Ah, is that a letter from Azek? Oh, we're already to the quote-unquote midpoint. They sometimes do these pretty early. First Epoch, Age of Chaos, Dark Epoch. Okay, fourth Epoch was Epoch of the Gods. Okay, good to know. That actually answers some questions of mine from last episode. Back to Koya University. Yeah, okay. Info on Hornakis. Something tells me it's not going to be that simple, given what we've seen of him. The doubt has been seeded for good, like, all in good reason, I'd say. Oh, not here? They do a really solid job with the 3D environments, honestly. And there's the blood painting. Yep, depicting the very place that you fought that night and the sword the knight wielded. Even if he's not directly the same person, he clearly has a link. Huh. Strange dreams is how you play it off. Concerning. Okay, ruins at the peak. Something tells me he won't let you go that easy. Yeah, read it here, huh? A vaguely reasonable statement, but concerning. They're playing up the fear factor. Yep. Yeah. I had a feeling. Didn't belong to humans. Interesting. Spans Lone and Intis. Ancient nation, yeah. Yeah, Nation of the Evernight is my guess. Uh-huh. Death was not the end. Okay. Oh. Okay. Huh. Strange. Presumably the Evernight goddess? Ruler of Evernight, Mother of the Sky. I would assume? I'm paranoid of that, coffee. Yeah, you could say that. How do you find that out? Okay. Coming out in. Okay. I also can't help but notice the one mark on his neck. Some of my secrets. Okay, was he not lying before? Actually bringing him here. I don't know if this is a good idea, but save me in the future. Okay. So is he not actually a antagonist? He might be dangerous, but this is not the angle I expected. I mean, it might go the angle of antagonist, but this is far more interesting, actually. A man lost like hundreds of years after when he lived. So that must have been, yeah, that must have been the Wraith. Huh. Either that or he has, but either he is out of like time, he somehow has lived this entire time or whatever, or he has the memories of the person. I don't, They look so similar. Oh, and the sword is still here. Ooh. What was that vision? Ooh. Oh, that's the skull. We did see him with a skeleton like rising out of his shadow or whatever in the first time we saw him. Oh, the place is fucking rebuilding? What? Um, how much of this is real? Okay, just a vision. Oh, a secret passage? He just goes down without any question. Does he still have the sword on him, though? Sealing wraiths. There's another wraith down here, perhaps? Okay, damaged, hence why the other wraith appeared, probably. Yeah, that looks like the knight. The fact that I was able to move that so easily. Uh... Jesus, that's a lot of power. What the fuck is happening? Are those shadows? Yeah, that's a lot of spirits. Oh, and they all go into him. Okay, okay. Concerning. Concerning. Are these all the spirits of the people who once lived here or something? Tuh. Where are we now? That's a lot of bodies. Presumably a battlefield, post a battle? Or just mass burning of bodies? Oh? Is this Azek rising from the dead? Seems like it to me. What is Azek? A curse? Kuh. Something tells me he won't die that easy. Something tells me he may be immortal. What? Just fucking evaporates the weapon? Okay, I think we might be befriending a very powerful entity. Jesus. Ooh, I love the first person. Down at the feet now. One man versus a fucking, like, battalion or army or whatever. Jesus. Huh. God, these visuals. That shot. Ooh, the reflection. Oh, but then the ground gave in? Oh, no, he was awakening his power. What the fuck is this power? That is a fucking massive skeleton. What the hell is this? This isn't normal Beyonder powers. Oh my god, I love this. Yeah, a single step is gonna devastate this army. Oh? Jesus Christ. We're getting some wild visuals here. I'm trying to grasp all of it. Who is this? Okay. So he was a knight who became a lord. Is this all before what happened with him, like, rising from the dead, or after? Yeah. That sword, the sword is at the, like, core of everything. What happened here? An army of the dead? Seems like his wife is sick. Did he tap into some dark power for the sake of his wife? Ooh, in English. Even his son is afraid. Okay, yeah, that... Oh, the breaking of the sword? That looked like Beyonder powers. The way his eye glazed over. Leaving them with the sword. Taking off his armor. Yeah, he seems like a totally different person from... I mean, then. I'm loving this track. So he just left it behind because he realized he was harming his family? Ooh. The, like, sketch style of that. Ooh. And he just walks away. Sequence unknown corpse collector pathway. I was assuming corpse collector. Wow. So he's a high power. Yeah. Huh. Jesus. Yeah, beheaded. Yeah. Oh. Is he raising his son from the dead as a ghost or something? Bloodline tracing. Holy shit. How powerful is he? What? What the? That's a lot of eyes. And a lot of skulls, Jesus Christ. This has gotta be like sequence 4 or higher, I feel like. Or lower, depending on how you want to say it. What is going on? Untraceable, damn, okay. Oh, but there's an invisible feather. Two people with mysterious power. Okay. A man who has regained his memories. Tenno Eggers, okay. Now on the hunt for the man or whoever who desecrated his son's grave. Is that what's going on here? Huh. No? Okay, still only partial. Seems like it. ties to death. Okay. Just constantly resetting. Dream, okay. Okay. Oh. Trying to leave his family to not suffer for his power. Jesus. The music's going off here, by the way. Yeah. An immortal man. Huh. Man who's lived countless lives. Wild. Yeah, it's not quite the same what the two of you have gone through, but yeah. Huh. In the reflection of the mirror of the window, he sees his family. Huh. He sees his family in the reflection, and then sees the family he has right now. Okay. Okay. That's a good assertion, like a good bow. Huh. Interesting. Interesting. Is that the episode? Yeah. Wow. That. Ooh, I like that episode. I really like that episode. There's a lot here that I really love. Isaac Eggers is honestly, I think, one of my favorite characters in this show now, just from like an interest level. We still know like a very limited amount about him because he knows a very limited amount about himself. But ooh, I'm always a fan of the tragic immortal type character. So, ooh, I really like that, and I feel like it's a good sort of twist on it in the sense that he isn't just an immortal man who has lived for centuries, but rather a man who constantly, like, as he described, effectively reincarnates into new people because every few decades he just forgets everything, has to restart, rebuild his life. But it always ends in tragedy because he will always outlive everybody he's around. But in this case, more specifically, it seems like whatever power is keeping him alive also has an almost corruptive influence. Or at least can. Huh. He obviously, as a high power corpse collector, seems to have, like, a major amount of control over the dead. Like, we saw that Ghost Army. Honestly, I don't think I even need to take notes on this episode to discuss it in this analysis because of how honestly focused this episode was. I obviously am going to take notes after the fact, make sure I don't miss anything, but for what I really want to talk about, everything I think I already have rolling in my brain. So, Azek Eggers. Obviously the focus of this episode, even more so than Trissy was of last episode. This episode does for Azek something that I really love, because it feels like Azek is a character who is going to be more so in the background for the most part in all likelihood, but he is this utter powerhouse who is still figuring himself out, but now has a mission that they want to complete, but can also be there to help Klein and realistically everyone else whenever the plot deems him to return to the main plot, which I'm always a fan of those kinds of characters. I guess where I want to start is with how they present Azek as a character within this episode and prior episodes, or episode, because we really only saw him once prior to now. Prior to now, and for the first chunk of this episode, pretty much the first half, they very intentionally were showing us Azek in a negative light. They were showing him as a suspicious figure who is hiding information, who has some kind of ulterior motive, probably part of some hidden organization was my guess. And that is clearly very intentional. They want to keep us on our toes, question if Azek can be trusted, to the point that when we're talking to him in this episode and he's saying, I often have weird, strange dreams and will wake up to find that I've drawn strange pictures, I didn't immediately trust that that was the truth. I merely thought that that might be a lie of some kind to hide what his true knowledge and intentions were. And on top of that, through that entire conversation, we are very much put into the mentality of Klein, where he's exceedingly nervous and anxious, worried what exactly Azek might be, who he might be, what he might be capable of, and what he might be willing to do. The way they have the shots of him putting a hand on Klein's shoulder, pushing him down onto his seat, that kind of thing, calling out slight differences in Klein's behavior. It's all to make us think that he is a bad guy, think that he is suspicious, and that maintains all the way up until pretty much we dive fully into the backstory. The concern that he might be evil or have bad intentions or be unleashing something evil unintentionally are there and are intentionally there all the way until we learn truly what kind of person he is. And I love that. I love that sort of bait and switch. And it's not even like a hard bait and switch. It's this slow development of understanding of who he is until we can finally recognize, okay, this man is powerful. This man is dangerous, but he is not our enemy. In fact, by helping him unlock some of his memory and learn that someone has defiled the grave of his son, we have made a powerful ally, in fact. And I just love that writing-wise. And it even extends to the powers he has. Very clearly and intentionally, his powers are that we would associate with evil. He is seemingly essentially some kind of necromancer. We don't know what sequence he is, we don't know what the name of his sequence is. He obviously is more powerful than Sequence 7 because he has several powers that we see in action that are far more powerful than anything we've seen Dali or any of our other corpse collectors do. My personal guess is that he's probably somewhere in that Sequence 5 to like 3, maybe 2 range. He probably isn't Sequence 1, because I feel like that is a bit much. Based on my understanding of things, that's where you sort of enter true godhood levels, and I feel like that is not quite where he is. He is definitely in this immortal, beyond the power of normal people type of position. I mean, we see him rise up out of a pile of burning bodies, stab through with weapons, and just destroy weapons by touching them, take on an entire army, and survive. We see him being truly immortal, living through the centuries. We see him have armies of ghosts. All of this is to show just how incredibly powerful and potentially dangerous this man is. But we have made an ally of him. And that, I think, actually ties into a general vibe of this show in a lot of ways, which is none of these powers are kind, good powers. None of these powers are the kind of thing that you would associate with good usually. The closest we get to quote-unquote good powers, I'd say, is divination, because usually divination is more neutral, and often divination can help people, that kind of thing. But if we just look at what some of the paths are, what the names of their sequences are, what the kind of powers they have are, these are not what we would associate with good. And despite that, the main group of characters we're following are protectors against evil, guardians of humanity to a degree. And so, with that in mind, why wouldn't that extend to the Necromancer? Why wouldn't the immortal man plagued by dark powers be able to be a good person as well? Perhaps this man who is viewed as an unholy being who can summon ghosts and giant skeletons to raise down armies, perhaps he isn't a bad person. Perhaps he's just a lonely, tragic soul who has lived through the centuries. And I like that. I like that sort of complication. And on top of that, I like that there is beginning to be this association between some of the more powerful figures we are meeting, and that is death. There's a line near the end of the episode that I'll have to find later where Klein asks some kind of question to himself of if he's connected to death somehow, or something like that. And it very much seems like there is being this association with death to some of our most powerful figures. And on top of that, I would acknowledge that there's one dot that could be mistaken as a mole, or might just be that, of course, but you know, it was drawn attention to, so I doubt it, that is on Azek's neck, that I immediately drew a connection to the 4 dots that appear on the back of Klein's hand. Of course, Klein's 4 dots fade away after he does stuff with the Divine Realm, where we didn't see Azek's dot ever disappear, but that also could just be a sign of the power has been more actively tapped into, or is more consistently being used, perhaps? And the reason I bring all of this up is just to say that there is a clear association going on between the abnormal powers of Klein and the abnormal powers of Azek, which makes me very excited to continue to learn more about Azek. Hopefully we'd see more of him in the future, because he's now a very intriguing character, all things considered. And beyond what I've already talked about, the way they did this episode was just incredible, I think. Visually, there were incredible shots. Musically, there was some great songs, and it all tied together incredibly well. The way he was almost walking through a memory of how the castle used to be when he first arrived at the ruin of the castle, alongside the later visuals of us flashing between hazy images that are clearly memories half forgotten. They did such a good job of visualizing the messiness of his own mind, of how he can remember these things as if they had just happened, but of course they have been centuries in the past. He has countless lives he has lived that he gets glimpses of. Sometimes he has a daughter, sometimes he has multiple kids, sometimes he's a lord, sometimes he's a knight, sometimes he's whatever else. If we're to believe that the castle is from the late 4th epoch, like was implied by the painting, this man has been around for at least a little over 1,000 years. I need to double check the midpoint lore blurb, but I'm going to assume that because they were saying a little over 1,000 years for late 4th epoch, that presumably the year that we've been given of like 13 whatever is presumably the year since the start of the 5th epoch, meaning that at the very least, Azek is probably somewhere in the like 1,500 years old range. So if his memory resets every few decades, the amount of lives he could have lived in that time is absurdly large. But with all that said, really the last thing I want to touch on for him is the seemingly almost corruptive influence of his powers. We see that seemingly the reason he leaves behind his family from the castle is because he was actively tapping into his powers, forming this army of ghosts, and it was actively damaging the health of his family. His wife was already sick and bedridden, barely conscious. His son was growing weak and was actively harmed when merely he didn't control his powers well enough, turning to look at him, and so he chose to leave them in an attempt to protect them. But, of course, tragically, they wouldn't escape tragedy. Even if it wasn't because of his powers, his family would still live through hard times, strife, that kind of thing. And he laments that when he finds his son's body beheaded and such. But what that leads me to wonder is what the nature of that corruptive influence is. Is it merely that if he uses his power too much, that the people and places around him begin to wither? Or is it more complicated than that? Is it more an innate state of his being that corrupts things around him, or is it a more active thing that is done as a side effect of something? Who knows if we'll find out, but I feel like it probably has to be more complicated than just a passive state of corruption and decay, because he has lived in his current life for however long as a teacher, and though his powers have sort of manifested from time to time and he has these strange dreams and such, we don't have any signs so far of anything around him dying really too much. But I think that's all I really immediately want to touch on for him, for Azek. And that really is a large amount of the episode that is just about Azek, so already I've touched on pretty much most of the episode. But I think the key main other piece to this is after the fight with the Wraith at the beginning of the episode, we get this moment with Klein in the Divine Realm making contact with a god. It's a very intriguing moment that, as I said in the reaction, realistically is more so to point to what can be done in the future. We learn a lot of what exactly Klein is capable of doing in this moment, and deeply, very much so, what he is not. He can effectively tap into the memories and knowledge of the creation of these sealed artifacts, and in the process, he can make contact with whatever beings were involved in the creation of them. That's a big deal. It means that if he were to get his hands on the notebook again, or anything else made by the Antigonus family, he would likely be able to uncover a lot more about just everything he's curious about. But of course, at the same time, it might lead him to making contact with something he really shouldn't. Because, as we saw in this episode, there is a price to be paid, no matter how temporary, for making contact with these powers beyond, especially gods. Making contact with the sun, essentially, burned him alive, only surviving because he had the power of the Grey Fog around him. The Divine Realm protected him and shielded him by being a buffer from this contact he was making. Just enough that he was in agonizing pain for far too long, but was able to survive nonetheless. And in the process, gain knowledge. He learned what the fourth sequence of the Sun Path was, just by witnessing the power of a god. So with that, as I mentioned in the reaction, if he was ever to find a artifact that was created in some way tied to his path, he likely could discover, at probably a great cost to himself, but nonetheless, he could discover the sequence 4, 5, whatever it would give him. Which of course is power that he does not need right now. He is not necessarily going to be capable of jumping that many sequences forward. He's still working on being ready to go to Clown, let alone sequence 4 or something like that. But it does serve as a setup for that being something that can be done. Or, alternatively, it also sets up the possibility that he could grant this information of the fourth sequence of the Sun Path to someone else who then can use it. It's entirely possible we at some point later in the story, whether it's this season or later, probably later, but who is a Sequence 5 Beyonder on the Path of Sun, who he can then grant this knowledge to so that they can achieve Sequence 4. But regardless of what actually it is setting up lore-wise or storyline-wise, what it does also do is give us a sense of power of the gods. They are real, they are material, they are powerful. You do not want to look upon the gods, as it will burn you. Presumably each god would have a different consequence for looking upon them. It merely is just the case that for the sun, it burns you alive, who would have guessed? Which inevitably makes me morbidly curious what would happen if you viewed any of the other gods. Like, what would happen if you viewed the Evernight goddess? Would you just go blind because everything becomes darkness or something like that? There's a lot of possibilities, I feel like. And at the same time, it does sort of scale Klein a little bit of his greater powers with the power of the Divine Realm and such is an incredibly powerful, set of abilities. It's something that elevates him massively. It's something that, with just the right placement of words, enables him to be viewed as a forgotten god or eldritch being by someone like the Hanged Man. But he is still far from true divinity. Far from anything like that. He cannot even look at the gods without nearly being destroyed. Which, of course, is more than a normal person could do, but regardless, he is still far from the epoch of just being a god. But with that, really I think the last thing I want to touch on is another Klein-related thing, which is at the very end of the episode. His assertion to spend time with his family, not get so locked into what he's doing that he neglects Benson and Melissa. He acknowledges very explicitly he is not Klein. He is Zhou, who is trying to get back to his life and his family, but he has Benson and Melissa here with him right now, who may not be his family in the Zhou sense, but are Klein's family, and more importantly to what he's thinking, Klein is their family. And just as he wants to get back to his family, they would not want Klein to leave them. So, though he does not want to stay, though he is not willing to give up the life he is trying to return to be with them, he does want to make sure that he does not leave them with no good memories of Klein. He wants to make sure that he can make lasting memories with them, more so for their own sake than anything. It really does a good job to show the level of care that Klein has, or Zhou, the level of empathy he has, but also that he is very set in his goals. He's not some kind of self-sacrificial martyr figure or anything. He is someone with his own personal motivations and goals that he is not willing to put aside for other people's sake. However, he is not wanting to trample on other people's lives in the process. He wants to make sure that the Moretti family has as many good memories with Klein as they can before he is gone. And on top of that, all of this is spurred on by the fact that he empathizes with the plight of Azek. He sees that Azek is this tragic figure who has never been able to have truly a happy life for long at all, really. Maybe for a few years, maybe even a decade or two, but never for long. He's always had to leave his family behind for their own good. He's always had to be this lonely, isolated figure. And though it's far from the same thing, Klein doesn't want to leave this family behind that will miss their brother. Until he's figured out how to leave, he wants to make sure that he is a part of their life. It's almost as if through the eternal loneliness of Azek's life that he learns about, he realizes the fleeting nature of this family dynamic. It's interesting, and I appreciate it. But it does also sort of put a line in the dirt of Zhou and Klein. Even if in certain ways his personality has blurred, he still is very conscious of the separation. But anyways, with that, I think I've realistically touched on just about everything in the episode largely, other than the stuff about Hornakis and the Nation of the Evernight. But realistically, that's just some more interesting lore stuff that we'll inevitably be getting more of in time. The one thing I will note is it is interesting how there is seemingly no sign of burial practices or what they did with their dead, other than the, like, keeping them in bed with you for 3 days or whatever. But beyond that, they just disappear. I have a feeling that is fairly relevant and important information. It's probably going to tie into something. But otherwise, I'm just sort of taking mental note of that stuff, and I think I don't really have too much more to say about it. So for now, I think that's pretty much where I'm going to end this analysis. So feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, leave a comment on your thoughts, and very special thanks to all of my channel members, including Decisive and Pokelove101 at the normal tier, and Kondo Nano at the cool person tier. Really appreciate your support, as always, and I hope you all have a great day. Bye-bye!